The bus rumbled on, its tires splashing through puddles, while the city around Emma blurred into streaks of light and rain. Her mind wouldn't stop racing. The photograph in her hand, the gentle man sitting beside her. The warmth that seemed to radiate from him, all felt unreal, like a dream she couldn't wake from. She kept turning the image over in her mind, studying the boy and the tall man beside him. Something about the man's eyes, so full of memories and longing, tugged at her heart in a way she couldn't name. Finally, she turned to him, unable to contain her curiosity any longer. Why did you leave?" she asked, her voice soft, almost fragile. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy with the weight of years gone by. The man looked out the window, his eyes following the streaks of rain as if searching for the right words. "I thought it was better that way," he said finally, his voice quiet, almost mournful. "I believed that staying away would protect you from the world, from my choices, from everything I feared I might bring into your life." Pff. Emma's chest tightened. Protect her. All those years, all those birthdays missed, holidays ignored, milestones unseen, was this really protection? She felt a swirl of anger, confusion, and grief rise up in her. Protect me. You left. You never came back. Do you know how it felt? Wondering if I had done something wrong? If I wasn't? Enough. He turned to her then, and she finally looked into his face fully. Time had not dulled the gentleness in his eyes, the quiet depth that seemed to hold every regret he had ever carried. "I know," he said softly, and the single word seemed to carry decades of remorse. "I can't take back the years I lost. I can't fix the moments I missed. But I am here now, and I want to try to make up for some of it, if you'll let me." Emma swallowed hard, the lump in her throat refusing to go away. She had imagined this moment countless times in her life, but never like this. Never on a crowded bus, the rain tapping against the windows, with a stranger who suddenly felt like the center of her entire world. And yet the warmth he radiated, the sincerity in his voice, made it impossible to deny the truth simmering in her chest. She wanted to hate him, to push him away, to guard herself as she always did, but part of her, the part she had buried deep, wanted to lean into him. To trust that this moment wasn't a trick. You're my grandfather," she whispered, the realization finally settling in. The words felt heavy, almost dangerous, carrying the weight of every unanswered question. Every long night she had spent imagining what it would be like to know him. He nodded, a small, sad smile tugging at his lips. "Yes, and I've spent too long away thinking I was doing right by you. I see now that I was only hiding from myself, from the responsibility I had to be part of your life." Emma's mind reeled. She had always imagined her grandfather as a distant figure. Someone wealthy, untouchable, someone who existed only in stories or in the whispers of her family. But this man sitting quietly beside her on a bus was human, vulnerable, regretful, and so achingly real that it made her heart ache with a mixture of fear, longing, and something she wasn't ready to name. "Why now?" she asked, her voice barely steady. "Why come back on a rainy Tuesday on a city bus? Why not? Why not when I was a child, when it would have mattered?" He looked at her, and in his eyes she saw decades of loneliness. "Because I've been afraid. Afraid that you would hate me. Afraid that you wouldn't remember me. Afraid that I would make things worse. But I can't be afraid anymore. Not if there's a chance to be part of your life again." Emma felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She blinked rapidly, not sure whether to let them fall. The anger she had felt at him was still there, simmering under the surface. But it was mingled now with something else. Hope, fragile and tentative, and a longing that made her chest ache. She studied his face, trying to reconcile the man before her with the stories she had been told, the brief glimpses of him she had imagined in her dreams. The reality was nothing like she had pictured. He wasn't cold or distant. He wasn't proud or untouchable. He was quiet, gentle, patient, and full of a sadness that made her want to reach out and hold him. Even though her mind screamed caution, the bus jerked again, the tires splashing water across the street. Emma's hand brushed against his as she shifted in her seat. and she felt a jolt of something recognition, or perhaps the electric charge of unspoken connection. She pulled her hand back quickly, embarrassed, but the warmth lingered. He noticed, of course, and gave her a small, understanding smile. "You don't have to forgive me," he said softly. "Not yet. I only ask for a chance. One chance to show you that I'm here now, that I want to be part of your life." Emma nodded slowly, though her mind was still a whirlwind. One chance. Could she let herself believe that? Could she allow herself to open the door that had been closed for so long? She had spent years protecting herself from disappointment, from hurt, from absence. But sitting here with the rain streaking the city into a blur outside the bus window, with a man who held both her past and her present beside her, she felt that protection begin to waver. Where have you been all this time?" she asked almost hesitantly, afraid that the answer would shatter the fragile connection forming between them. He sighed, leaning back in his seat, eyes distant as if the rain and cityscape outside held the answers he sought. "I've been everywhere and nowhere. I built a life I thought would give you security, that I thought would keep you safe from the mistakes I made. But the truth is, I missed you. Every single day. Every birthday, every holiday, every little moment, I wasn't there. I felt it deeply." Emma's chest tightened. She had always imagined her grandfather's absence as a vague shadow, something she had learned to live with. But hearing him say it aloud, feeling the sincerity and pain in his voice, made the absence real, tangible, and almost unbearable. She wanted to shake him, to demand explanations, to curse him for the years lost, but instead, she found herself leaning slightly closer, drawn by a magnetic pull she didn't understand. "Why now?" she repeated softly. "Why come back now, after all these years?" "Because," he said, his voice almost breaking, "I realize that life is too short to keep hiding, too short to let love slip away, too short to wait for the perfect moment that never comes. And you are the most important part of my life. Always were." Emma felt tears spill over, hot and sudden. She wiped at them quickly, embarrassed, but he didn't flinch, didn't look away. He simply gave her the space to feel, the patience to process, the quiet understanding that made her heart ache and swell all at once. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to know him, to let him into her life, to bridge the years of absence with moments of connection, however small. The thought terrified her and thrilled her in equal measure. She had spent so long imagining her grandfather as an untouchable figure, a man of wealth and mystery, and now the reality was disarming in its simplicity. He was human, flawed, longing, and willing to reach out. The bus turned a corner, lights glinting off wet asphalt, and Emma realized she had been holding her breath. She exhaled slowly, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. The rain outside softened, the rhythmic tapping against the window matching the beat of her racing heart. "You're different from how I imagined you," she said quietly, almost to herself. He chuckled softly, a sound that carried warmth and relief. "I imagined you as someone very serious, very cautious, someone who would never give me a chance." Emma managed a small smile, though her heart was still in turmoil. "I am cautious," she admitted. "But maybe I've been too cautious. Maybe I've been protecting myself from everything, including you." The man nodded, his eyes glimmering with something between hope and relief. "Then let's take it slow, one step at a time. No pressure, no expectations, just time together if you're willing." Emma considered it, her mind a whirl of emotions: anger, longing, grief, hope, and something tender that she couldn't yet name. She had spent so long imagining what this moment would be like, and yet the reality was so much more complex, more human, more alive than she could have dreamed. The bus slowed as it approached a stop, the tires hissing over wet pavement. Emma's gaze returned to the photograph, to the boy and the man standing beside him. Recognition flared sharper now, and her chest ached with both sorrow and anticipation. She realized that this journey, this chance encounter, was only the beginning. As the doors opened and the city noises spilled in, Emma felt a mixture of fear and excitement. She didn't know what would happen next, didn't know if she could forgive him fully, or if she was ready to let him into her life. But for the first time in years, she felt a spark of something she had thought lost forever: connection, and the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, some things could be mended. And as the rain continued to fall, soft and steady, she realized that her life and her heart were about to change in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Emma ran through the wet streets, her umbrella barely keeping her from getting soaked. The sky had opened up suddenly, dumping cold rain that drenched her hair and soaked the thin coat she had thrown on in a rush. She was late again for the bus, and she cursed herself silently. Why did she have to linger in that coffee shop, scrolling through her phone, watching life happen to everyone else? She had promised herself she wouldn't miss the bus, but here she was, splashing through puddles, gripping her bag tight and hoping desperately that she hadn't missed it. The bus stop was almost empty when she arrived, save for a few damp commuters, hunched over their umbrellas or tapping impatiently on their phones. The familiar rumble of the approaching bus brought a small relief, and she quickened her pace, the strap of her bag cutting into her shoulder. As the bus slowed to a halt, she climbed aboard, shaking off water, her shoes squeaking softly on the wet floor. The driver barely glanced at her as she dropped her fare into the machine, and she slid toward the back, looking for an empty seat. Almost all the seats were taken, the hum of the bus filled with quiet murmurs and the occasional cough. Emma finally spotted a spot near the rear, a window seat with someone already seated beside it. The man didn't look like anyone she knew. He had a calm, steady presence, his posture straight, his suit neat, though not flashy. There was an unusual warmth in his eyes, a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the cold, wet day outside. She slid in beside him, brushing droplets off her coat and muttering a quiet "excuse me." He gave a small smile, nodding slightly, his eyes lingering for a moment longer than seemed casual. The bus lurched forward, and Emma felt the usual disorientation of motion, the city outside streaked with the blur of rain and headlights. She tried to focus on her phone, scrolling through emails and messages, pretending she wasn't aware of the man beside her. Yet she couldn't ignore the subtle feeling that something about him felt familiar, though she couldn't place it. He didn't speak at first, just adjusted his coat, folded his hands, and watched the window, as if the city passing by held some secret he alone could read. After a few stops, he turned slightly, giving her a soft, almost hesitant look. "You look like you've had a long day," he said gently. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried an ease that made her tense shoulders relax slightly. Emma gave a small, tired laugh. "You could say that," she murmured, unsure why she was replying to a stranger, why his voice felt comforting rather than intrusive. He didn't speak for a moment, just watched her from the corner of his eyes, as though weighing whether to say more. Then, almost abruptly, he reached into his coat pocket. Emma barely had time to glance at him before he pulled out a small photograph. The edges were worn, the black and white image faded slightly with age. He held it out to her carefully, like it was fragile, like it could shatter if handled roughly. Emma blinked, startled. What is this?" she asked, her fingers hovering in the air, unsure whether to take it. The man's eyes softened, filled with something that seemed like regret mixed with longing. "Someone very dear to me." "And I believe very dear to you too," he said quietly. Emma frowned, leaning closer to get a better look at the photograph. It was a picture of a young boy, shy and smiling, standing beside a tall man with a gentle face. Her heart skipped a beat. There was something familiar about the boy. She couldn't place it immediately, but the feeling of recognition stirred a memory deep inside her. A memory she hadn't touched in years. She shook her head slightly, confused. It couldn't be, could it? The bus hit a bump and her bag shifted against her legs, jostling her thoughts. She glanced at the man, really looked at him for the first time, and something in her chest tightened. His eyes held a story, one that she didn't yet understand, but it felt old and heavy, like it had been waiting a long time to be told. There was a quiet intensity in his gaze, a mixture of hope and apprehension that made her stomach twist with curiosity and a little fear. I don't recognize him," she said slowly, her voice uncertain. Pointing at the photograph, he smiled faintly, almost sadly. "Not yet," he said, "but you will. Memories have a way of waiting until the right moment. Until then, I can show you this. And perhaps it will stir something." Emma's mind raced. There was a tension in the air that she couldn't name. She wanted to ask more questions, to demand explanations, but at the same time, there was a strange comfort in his presence. He didn't seem imposing or intimidating. He seemed familiar, like a half-forgotten dream. She glanced out the window, watching the rain blur the lights into streaks of color, trying to calm herself. Her pulse was quick, her hands slightly trembling. Who was this man? Why did he have that photograph? And why did it feel like everything inside her was being nudged awake after years of quiet dormancy? The bus lurched again, throwing her slightly against the seat. He reached out instinctively to steady her, and their hands brushed briefly. A spark of recognition, or was it just emotion, ran through her. She quickly withdrew her hand, embarrassed, but the warmth lingered deep in her chest. You don't understand yet," he said, his voice quiet, carrying a weight that made Emma swallow hard. "I've been away a long time. Life took me where I thought I had to go, but I never stopped thinking about what I left behind." Emma's heart raced. Something clicked faintly, a name whispered at the edge of memory. Could it really be him? No, that wasn't possible. She had imagined meeting her grandfather countless times, always in some grand, imposing place. Never like this. Never on a rainy bus with a stranger handing her a photograph. The bus slowed again, the rhythmic squeak of brakes filling the awkward silence. Emma tried to collect herself, to focus on the sound of rain, the lights outside. Anything other than the man beside her and the storm he had brought into her calm, orderly world. Why? Why are you showing me this?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Her curiosity was overwhelming, but so was her fear. She didn't know if she was ready for answers. She wanted to unravel the mystery he carried so casually in his hand. The man looked out the window, watching the rain streak down the glass as if the answer lay in the blur of passing lights. Then he turned back to her, his eyes steady and warm. "'Cause it matters. Because you need to know, and because maybe it's time we stopped pretending that distance solved anything." Emma felt a lump form in her throat. Distance had solved a lot. Yes, it had kept her heart safe, kept her from feeling the ache of absence, but it hadn't erased the longing, questions, the emptiness that sometimes pressed down on her in quiet moments. And now, sitting here, drenched in the cold city rain and the warmth of this stranger beside her, she realized how deep that absence ran. The bus jerked again, and Emma's gaze fell to the photograph once more. Her hands trembled slightly as she traced the faint outlines of the boy and the man standing beside him. Something inside her stirred a fragile, fluttering thread of recognition, of hope. Something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. She wanted to reach out, to ask more, to demand answers, but she also feared what those answers might bring. The man beside her watched her closely, as if he could see into her thoughts, and a small, sad smile played on his lips. "Patience," he said softly. "It will come to you, and when it does, everything will make sense." Emma's mind whirled. The bus rolled through puddles, the wipers swishing steadily, and the rain outside seemed to blur time itself. She felt caught between past and present, memory and reality, curiosity and fear. She didn't know this man, yet somehow it felt like she had always known him. And in that strange, dizzying mix, a sense of anticipation took root. Fragile but undeniable, the bus continued on, carrying them both through the wet, glimmering city. Emma couldn't tear her eyes away from him, from the photograph, from the quiet tension that seemed to hum in the small space between them. She didn't understand it yet, and she wasn't sure she was ready. But something inside her told her that this moment, this bus ride, this stranger, this photograph was the beginning of a story she couldn't ignore. As the bus neared the next stop, Kama realized she was holding her breath. The man beside her gave a small, reassuring nod, as if he understood exactly what she felt. And in that brief, wordless exchange, she knew that everything had changed, though she didn't yet know how. The rain continued to fall, soft and insistent, drumming against the roof of the bus. And Emma, heart racing and mind spinning, felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement, of longing and uncertainty. As she waited for the moment when recognition and, perhaps reconciliation, would finally arrive. This is a fully expanded part. One at a fast pace, keeping tension, mystery, and emotional hooks consistent while using simple language. The bus finally reached the corner near Emma's apartment, slowing as it approached the stop. She gathered her bag and coat, her fingers still trembling slightly from the intensity of the conversation she had just shared with the man beside her. He had been quiet for the past few minutes, his eyes fixed out the window. But Emma could feel his presence, the steady, comforting weight that had somehow begun to anchor her heart. "Are you getting off here?" he asked softly, turning toward her. The gentle concern in his voice made her chest tighten. "Yes," she replied, trying to steady her voice, though it quivered slightly. The thought of leaving the bus, stepping out into the wet city streets after everything she had just experienced, was daunting. But more daunting was the thought of losing this fragile connection if she let herself walk away. He nodded, sliding his hand into his coat pocket. "Then I'll come with you," he said. Not in a commanding way, not in a way that suggested authority or control, but in a way that made her feel safe, like a presence she could rely on. Even after years of absence, they stepped off the bus together. The cool rain soaking through the hems of their coats, mixing with the lingering warmth of their conversation. Emma's shoes splashed softly in puddles, and the streetlights reflected off the wet asphalt, painting the city in muted gold and silver streaks. She glanced at him, and for a moment she saw him not as the man who had left years ago, not as the wealthy, distant figure she had imagined, but as someone human, flawed, and achingly real. She started, then stopped. Words seemed inadequate. How could she capture the flood of emotion, the relief, the longing, the anger, the tentative hope that surged inside her? She swallowed hard, glancing down at her feet before meeting his gaze again. His eyes, warm and patient, held an understanding that made her feel both exposed and safe. "Emma," he said softly, his voice carrying a weight of years and unspoken regret. "I know I can't make up for the time I've lost. I can't erase the years we didn't have together. But I want to try, if you'll let me." She nodded slowly, unsure whether she was agreeing to forgive him or simply agreeing to see what came next. Perhaps both. Perhaps neither. The rain continued to fall, soft and insistent, masking the quiet tension that hung between them. The city around them moved on, oblivious to the delicate reconnection unfolding on the corner. "Where should we go?" Emma asked finally, her voice hesitant but tinged with curiosity. He smiled faintly. "There's a small cafe nearby. Warm drinks, quiet corners, a place where we can start, if you're willing." Emma nodded again, and they began walking side by side, the rain dampening the edges of their coats, the glow of streetlights reflecting off wet pavement. Each step felt surreal, as if she were walking through a dream. Through a moment she had imagined countless times but never truly believed could happen. And yet, here it was, real, fragile, and full of possibility. The cafe was small, tucked between larger buildings with a warm light spilling from the windows. The aroma of coffee and baked goods greeted them as they entered, a comforting contrast to the cold, wet streets outside. They found a quiet corner, far from other patrons, and sat down across from each other. Emma's hands clutched her bag nervously, while he rested his hands calmly on the table. His posture relaxed but attentive. For a few moments, they said nothing, listening instead to the soft hum of conversation. the clinking of cups, and the faint hiss of the espresso machine. Emma's mind was a storm, her thoughts tumbling over one another. She wanted to ask 100 questions about his life, about the years he had missed, about why he had left in the first place. But each question felt heavy, laden with the potential to unravel the delicate thread of connection they were beginning to weave. Finally, she spoke. "I don't even know where to start," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, as if he understood perfectly. "Then don't start with the hard questions. Start with the small things. Tell me about your day, about what's important to you, about life. Let me catch up slowly." Emma hesitated, then exhaled, allowing a small smile to form. "It's just work. Long hours, deadlines, people who don't understand what it's like to care. But today was different. Today I met someone I didn't expect. Someone who reminded me that maybe it's not too late for certain things." He tilted his head, curiosity softening the lines of his face. "Someone who reminded you of what?" Her smile faltered, a blush creeping over her cheeks. "Of family," she admitted quietly. "Of connection. Of the things I've missed." He reached across the table, his hand brushing hers this time, gently, deliberately. Emma didn't pull away. The warmth of his touch, the quiet sincerity in his eyes, made the years of absence seem both vast and strangely surmountable. "I've missed you, Emma," he said, his voice low but steady. "More than I can ever explain. I've carried the regret every day, and I want to be part of your life if you'll let me." Tears welled in her eyes, and she quickly blinked them back, unsure whether to let them fall. The hurt, the longing, the hope, they all surged together, making it impossible to separate one from another. She wanted to say yes, to reach across and embrace him, to let him into the space she had kept guarded for so long. And yet caution whispered in her ear, reminding her that trust was fragile, that hearts could break again. She started, then stopped. Words felt inadequate, incapable of capturing the storm inside her. Finally, she settled on a small nod, letting her eyes meet his, letting him see the mixture of fear and hope, of longing and hesitation that danced in her gaze. He smiled softly, as if that nod said more than words ever could. "That's all I ask," he said gently. "Just a chance, a beginning. Nothing more, unless you're ready." The afternoon passed in a blur of conversation and quiet moments. They shared stories of Emma's life, her work, her friends, her small triumphs and struggles, and he listened with genuine interest, asking questions, laughing softly at the moments that deserved it. And when he spoke of his own life, of the years spent away, of the mistakes he had made and the regrets he carried, Emma listened too, not with judgment, but with understanding. She realized that this man, her grandfather, was not perfect, but he was real. And in his reality, she saw the possibility of something she had long thought impossible: connection, reconciliation, and the slow rebuilding of trust. Outside, the rain had slowed, leaving the streets glistening with reflections of light. Emma and her grandfather finally stood to leave, the weight of the afternoon settling gently over them. As they stepped back onto the street, he offered his arm, and she took it, feeling the solid reassurance of his presence. Together, they walked through the wet city, side by side, the world moving around them, but irrelevant compared to the fragile bond they were beginning to nurture. "You know," he said softly, his voice carrying a warmth that made her heart lift, "I don't want to miss anything else. I want to be here for the small moments, the quiet moments, the moments that matter. Will you let me?" Emma looked up at him, the rain glinting in her hair, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. She felt the weight of years of absence, of longing, pressing against her chest. And then she exhaled a long, steady breath and nodded. "Yes," she said, "I want that too." He smiled, a quiet, relieved smile that seemed to lift some of the years of regret from his shoulders. "Good," he said simply, "because this is just the beginning. There's so much we can share, so much to catch up on, and I don't want to waste another day." They walked together through the city, the rain now only a gentle mist, the world around them soft and shimmering. Emma realized that life had given her a second chance, unexpected and fragile, to reconnect with someone she had thought lost forever. And though the path ahead was uncertain, though the years of absence couldn't be erased, she felt a spark of hope ignite in her heart, hope that some things, some connections could be repaired, could be nurtured, could bloom again. As they reached a quiet park on their way home, her grandfather paused, looking down at her with an expression that was both tender and full of quiet determination. "Emma," he said softly, "whatever happens, we'll face it together. I won't leave again. I promise." Emma felt a lump rise in her throat. The promise, simple as it was, carried more weight than any gift, more meaning than any grand gesture. It was the first real connection she had felt with him, the first assurance that he was truly here now, not just in words or photographs, but in presence and heart. "I believe you," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly with emotion. And in that moment, standing in the soft glow of the city lights, the rain lightly falling around them, she realized that forgiveness, trust, and love were not things that could be rushed. They were things that had to be nurtured, moment by moment, step by step. Her grandfather reached out, taking her hand gently in his. Emma didn't pull away. She let him lead her through the quiet streets, letting the warmth of his presence fill the spaces that had long been empty. They walked in silence for a while, letting the connection between them speak louder than words, letting the world carry on around them while they discovered the fragile, beautiful beginning of a renewed relationship. And as the city lights shimmered in puddles, and the mist of the rain softened the edges of everything around them, Emma felt something she hadn't in years, the quiet, steady comfort of being seen.